Optimism Monday, but we're comparing and contrasting today. We're going to compare Monte Morris and Bones Hyland. What are you getting with Bones that you didn't get with Monte? What'd you get with Monte that you don't get with Bones? Plus, how's that Jamal Murray fella fit into the equation? All this and more on Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. Thanks for making this your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, where you can join Foix, like Sean Cortez and Zamora and 5555-ish Joe, who's banging in here. And who else we got? Joshua is also in here. Joshua M. So many folks joining in, and Josh Winninger repping the Bones Bar today on the show. Thanks for joining us, making this part of your day. Really appreciate it. It's Optimism Monday. But on today's show,
Sunday night, but yeah.
Sunday night, on today's show, we're going to talk about Bones Hyland and Monte Morris. We're going to talk about the difference between the two, what you get with Bones Hyland as a backup point guard versus what you get with Monte Morris, and what the Nuggets may miss now that Monte Morris is a Washington Wizard for now. Also, we'll talk about how Jamal Murray fits into the equation in the stable of Nuggets point guards, which means it's an opportunity for me to cram Ish Smith into the conversation. Very excited to do that later.
You didn't use him in the teaser. I was surprised by that. I'm like, what are you doing, man? Don't forget Ish.
So here's the difference: is I try and keep my obsessions like separate. They're just my thing. I don't expect I don't expect my Ish obsession to be anybody else's Ish obsession. For those of you, by the way, programming note. On Wednesday, so we're probably going to have a show Tuesday. On Wednesday, we're talking Jamal Murray and why Jamal sometimes starts the season slow and how the Nuggets can help him rectify that so he can make his first All-Star team. That's on Wednesday's show. Bring your Jamal Murray thoughts on Wednesday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. On Friday, we're launching a new series to get us through the remainder of the offseason, which is What If? We're going to talk about various things that could have happened in the Nuggets world, and if they happened, what would the ramifications have been? On Friday's episode, we'll talk about two different things that involve the Carmelo Anthony Nuggets. One, well, what if the Nuggets had actually beaten that Lakers team that I kind of think they were better than in 2009? And what if Carmelo Anthony never left? Those questions and more on Friday's edition of What If with Locked On Nuggets. Okay, let's get started right here, Adam. First off, how was the weekend? How are the birds?
No birds to speak of, but it was a good weekend. It was a good weekend.
There is a nest of eagles by my house. It's about a mile from me. Like, they are certifiably, undeniably eagles on top of a lamppost. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, you can tell. Like, I was like, no, they're not. My kids were like, they're eagles. I was like, no, they're not eagles. Like, we stopped and got the binoculars, and I was like,
Eagles, yeah.
They're Eagles. Colorado, an amazing place.
Amazing
Also
place.
amazing, Bones Hyland. So let's talk about Bones Hyland and Monte Morris.
Okay.
All right. Bones Hyland takes over as the backup point guard full-time for the Denver Nuggets. Nuggets basically...
First of all, we assume so. I want to put this out there.
Ooh.
Michael Malone... Well, no, because Michael Malone was asked about that. You know, Bones Hyland, he's the guy, and he's like, we're going to find out in camp. Just worth noting. It's just worth noting. Like, Bones Hyland did enough, I think, last year for me to feel very confident that he is going to be tasked with that. But there's always a chance. I don't think Bones would obviously, there's no chance he'll be out of the rotation. But do they feel, maybe we need Ish out there? I at least think there's a chance that's how it shakes out.
Yeah, I mean, look, best laid plans, right? How many times have there been situations where teams like, this guy's going to take over this role, and then just the guy wasn't ready or took a step backwards or whatever? It's interesting. I was talking to Seth Partnow today about some comments from... I forget who, but they were talking about, it's Draymond. Draymond was telling Kyle Kuzma about the fact that they don't win the 2020 title if they trade Kuzma instead of Ingram. And everyone was like, Ingram's so much better, blah, blah, blah. My point in this is that Kuzma was like chosen to take over a big role. And then he did, and then like he slid, and in 2020-21, he was like out of the rotation by the time the playoffs came around. And that was kind of weird. I think Kuzma's been pretty good.
Right.
My point here is that not all progression in the NBA is linear. Very little of it, honestly, usually is. Like a good example of this is Donovan Mitchell, who was an absolute superstar his first 3 seasons in the league, and the last 2 has really kind of slid backwards for a number of reasons. He hates Rudy Gobert, but also other reasons included. So, like, all I'm saying is, Bones is in a backup role. You've actually, your commentary on this has been really interesting. I'm paying a lot of attention to the things that you say and think about Bones in this role. And the reason I say that is you're not negative. You've absolutely been like, I think he could be great. I think he could be dynamic. I think he could be absolutely pivotal and take a big step forward. But you've also been like, this is a big step that they are asking of him. And not everybody is able to make that step. And it's not even about like their ability. It's just like the timing wasn't right.
Let me clarify, because Bones I think is phenomenal. I'm fully on the Bones bandwagon. Like, I'm such a big believer in the talent. If you told me, not forget his ceiling as a starter, like a meaningful starter, one of the 15 best point guards in the NBA, and it's an NBA that's loaded with great point guards. Like, I think he can be that kind of player, and who knows, once you get to that level, maybe even higher. Maybe you can even start to think all-star or this or that. He's that good, and some of the outlier talents of his, off the dribble shooting, deep three-point shooting, combined with passing, combined with quickness, quick first step, great handle. Those things, they're so dynamic that the sky's the limit for him. So I'm so high on him. The challenges that are facing him are what I think are so unique and almost overlooked, because we always think about talent, and it's just like, okay, well, talent, then it's going to be this. The challenges are, this year, he's going to be way up the line on the scouting report. Last year, very, very far down. This year, especially early on, I think he's going to be one of the top lines. We got to stop Jokic, Michael Porter, Jamal, this or that. But you're going to get to Bones very, very quickly, as in, hey, head of the snake for that second unit. And then the second part, and it kind of brings us to current events, Bones has only experienced the good parts of fame in his rookie season because there was no pressure. There was only excitement. And everybody that is taking note of Bones online or in the media or wherever it is, it's the honeymoon phase. Next year, and we're already starting to see this a little bit this summer, there's a downside of it that I don't think he's fully aware of. That is, people start to psychoanalyze who you are based on the things that you share about yourself online. And people start to criticize, fairly or not, start to criticize little things or how you carry yourself or this or that. And I just think the downside of being somebody that's that famous, this is probably the year that catches up to him. And I hope that he has the right people around him and also is able to roll with the punches to kind of learn, okay, don't take this stuff too seriously. Don't get too frustrated with the fact that I have a bad week and everybody's saying bad things about me.
As we talk about the comparison for what he's going to bring to the table versus Monte, I don't know how else to put this. Monte Morris is essentially the perfect backup point guard. He's never so good that he threatens your star starting point guard. Like, you would not be in a situation where, like, there was never a point where we're like, maybe Monte should start over Jamal. Like, that was never obviously a thing.
Or even close. Like, there was never even a time when you were like, man, Monte's having a game. He should close over Jamal.
Right.
Or they should run it through Monte right now. Like, you'd never do that. And you might with Bones. He's that good.
From his rookie season was technically he played 3 games. But actuality, his first real season, 2018-19, Monte shot 41% from 3. He shot 49, 41, 80. Those were his shooting splits with
That's crazy.
The 3.6. Yeah, the 3.6 assists per game with only 0.6 turnovers, the legendary assist to turnover ratio. The very first nickname that Nuggets press row gave him was the Tourniquet, because when that season, you don't remember this? You were at the other end of the table.
Okay.
Our side of the table started calling him the Tourniquet because it was like the Nuggets would be having these weird quarters in 2018-19 where it was like everything was in disarray and things were starting to wobble, and Monte would come in and just stop the bleeding, just settle everything down. It's really incredible that from the very jump, Monte Morris was a calming presence for everybody. Like, he was just ready to go, knew how to do the job. I'm doing all this work for all these different teams as I'm getting ready for the NBA season and going through our win total projections for the Action Network. And so often, I'm like, you know what they really need is they need like a floor general point guard who can just get the offense organized. There's so few of those guys in the league today. And there's amazing talents that can score and do all these incredible things. But like the Houston Rockets could desperately use Monte Morris. And so I think in the second segment, one thing that we should talk about is Bones going to be able to be Monte-like at all? Just even a shade of Monte. Is that good for him? Is that bad for him? Should they just let Bones be Bones? How does this work out? If they need somebody to settle things down, who's that going to be? I think that's an important question, and we'll get to that after the break. But first, I've got to tell you, I'm firing on all cylinders right now. That was a dynamite transition by me, I just want to say. But first, the Nuggets are trying to build that point guard rotation. No better way to do that than with a Built Bar. If you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you're depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. Hurricane knows what I'm talking about. And guess what? There's a new flavor. Ready? Delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. That's right, Built has done it again. Let me introduce you to your new favorite, and my daughter's, by the way. She got her hands on one of them and now is like tearing through the latest box of the cookie dough chunk puffs that we've gotten. They have a light and chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and of course they're covered in 100% real chocolate. My daughter loves these, especially after she gets back from gymnastics class. She just absolutely tears through them. We split one. It's a very adorable daddy-daughter moment. All the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it, plus it's healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories, and they got a whopping 15 grams of protein, and not just protein, but collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. Run to Built.com and snag a box for yourself and your family. You're going to love the new cookie dough chunk puff. Whether you need a snack for your workout, a late night treat, or just need to grab a quick bite, Built is a perfect protein bar, and they taste better than a candy bar. Ditch the calories, fat, and sugar. Grab yourself a Built bar. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, Josh Winger, for 15% off at Built.com. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for joining us and making this part of your day. Recording this on a Sunday night. Adam was like, let's get a jump on the week. That's how excited Adam Mares was to get back here with Locked On Nuggets. All right, so we're talking about Bones Hyland and Monte Morris, and I was talking about how much of a steady force he could be. This, to me, is like the big question. It's not about Bones' talent. It's about, one, can Bones emulate what Monte did in terms of being a calming, efficient force in any way? And if he can't, does his raw talent simply make up for that? And alongside that, if he does that, does somebody else need to be that kind of calming force if the things start to get a little bit out of control? What are your thoughts on all those questions?
Well, the part about it being a necessity, like it being important, 1,000%. One of the most important things, because I don't think there's another guy. I talk about Christian Brown or Davon Reed, to me, are going to play a very big role as the number 2 guard. Those aren't calming forces. A rookie and basically a guy who's never really been in the NBA in a major role. So there's no question that you're going to need that. Bruce Brown, as good as he is, if you're asking him to be that guy, you're asking an extra job of him, basically, based on all the other stuff that he should be doing. So to me, there's no question that it's an important one for Bones. Here's what's so exciting about him. I don't think this as Monte is. He's a better, more dynamic player. His peaks will be higher. I don't think he'll be as good as just like, if he's on the court, you feel good about what your team's doing. He's running the show. He's at least getting you organized and doing all this. But I think what's exciting about Bones is he does have that in him more than most, if not all, players off of the bench that have his scoring talent. Meaning, for a great scorer, he's a very good floor general. And that's the part of his game that I'm very curious to see if it flourishes this year. Is he that calming presence to where this is not a topic of conversation at any point this season?
So most times, you and I just tend to talk about these things in terms of a skill set because you and I understand how the numbers can sometimes be influenced by various things. Like, we're pretty data forward people here, but we also understand that stats aren't necessarily the story. They're part of it, and then how you use them is how you tell the story. One thing I do think is interesting, though. So Monte in that rookie season that we're calling it 2018-19 had a 5.4 assists per 36 mark, along with a 1.0 turnover rate. So 5.4 to 1, which again is just amazing. Monte's so good at just not turning the ball over. Bones was at 5.2 assists per game with a 2.4 turnover margin. That turnover margin is a little bit more of what you'd expect for a rookie.
That's like regular. It sounds bad next to Monte, but that's like
but it's
regular.
Fine. honestly, given the bench unit and the personnel that he was playing with and the types of rotations that he was getting, I honestly think 5.2 is pretty encouraging. For him to have the same assist rate as Monte Morris with what was a disastrous second unit that he was most often playing with, that's really encouraging, because one of the things that we hit almost immediately was he started making I'm trying to think of what the word would be.
High level reads? I mean, he's just making
high level reads and high leverage plays, right?
Yeah.
So being able to make those key plays that you need to make in order to really punish a defense for the decisions that they make. Like, he's a willing, capable, and slick passer. And those things I think are very good in that second unit, I think, is going to be, let me put it this way. The second unit, I think, is going to be a little bit wild, but you'll take wild over miserable, right?
Well,
like,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say there's one important note here, though, about the turnovers, and that is that Bones does more than Monte in terms of like attacking and creating and shot creation. Not like Monte is more of a passer, and then his points come in pick and roll. Bones' points will come in isolation. His assists will come in isolation. His assists will come in transition. So naturally, you're going to have more turnovers. Like Jokic averages a lot of turnovers too. Nobody would say like, oh, he has a worse turnover than like DeAndre Jordan, who averages very little. It's like, no, he's asked to do a lot more, so it's expected that he'll have more turnovers. So that part, I think Bones is just very, very underrated in that. He's just so much more dynamic that there's going to be higher highs and lower lows.
I agree with that. And part of this is one of the benefits of, if, knock on wood, everyone's healthy, then the starting unit is going to give him cover for this, right? Not only from the perspective of, not only from the perspective of, oh, the starters are so good, it's okay, like he can struggle a little bit or have a bad stretch, but also there's a good possibility Bones is going to be playing with a lot of starters. Like, he's going to get minutes with Jamal and MPJ and Aaron and Jokic. Like, he will probably have those stretches. I think one of the differences, I think, with Monte is, honestly, that may be one of the key differentials is you would almost never close with Monte and Jamal. We actually kind of talked about it from time to time about like, hey, why don't you try the Monte Jamal minutes a little bit more, because they're pretty good, right? And it kind of never happened.
Loved them. I loved when they closed with him. So
yeah, and so I think, honestly, I think Bones has maybe a better chance of filling in those minutes depending on what it is. Like if it's a Jamal, Bones, KCP, Gordon, Jokic, depending on what's going on, right? Like I think that's maybe an area where Bones, like I think Bones can do more with the starting unit than Monte did, which is impressive again, because Monte was really, like, Monte deserved to be, like, Monte was clearly the best guard on the roster last year. Like, just pretty clearly the best guard on the roster. So, again, they're going to miss Monte just from in terms of that steadiness.
I agree.
And that consistency. But I do think that what Bones gives them, he's able to, and especially those deep threes that you mentioned, he's able to hit those haymaker shots that when he hits them, it just levels the opponent, especially when you're home and the crowd's going nuts. Like, there's a palpable energy that picks up in Ball Arena when Bones is like checks in. Like, there's a buzz about it.
There's no question about it. And like, if you just break down the skill sets, okay, Monte maybe fewer turnovers, Bones significantly better handle. Not that Monte had a bad handle. He had like a functional, safe, didn't turn it over there. But Bones has the ability to break people down off of the dribble that really nobody else in the Nuggets has other than Jamal Murray. Like, there's only those two guys, I think, on the roster that you look at and say, they can just make something because they got past their guy in a one-on-one to that degree. So he brings that. The deep shooting is so important to me. Like, his numbers, I think he was number one in the NBA, like above a certain threshold of attempts and making deep threes last year. And I think that number is going to go up. He's so comfortable. He is this new generation of player that grew up with that being an okay shot. Like, he had the green light to do it. He's very confident and he's very good at it. Off the dribble. He gets to the rim. Like, not that many guys can get to the rim from the guard position the way he can. So those things are huge. The length and athleticism, I think, is going to shine, especially in the minutes that he plays with the more athletic lineups. You have an Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., maybe even a Davon Reed or Christian Brown.
KCP's athletic.
So you put him in an athletic combo, and I think it's going to shine. I always say those things compound. The more athletic guys are on the court, the more you sort of notice it. And he's one of those guys where I think you would notice it more. So he brings those talents that, yes, you lose a lot from Monte, but you're going to get something different, and in some ways worse, but in some ways better from both.
I love this analogy from Josh Winger. I love this. They're like an automatic versus manual transmission, talking about Monte versus Bones. Monte is automatic and smooth, nice and easy. Bones can be a little herky-jerky, but when he hit it just right, baby, you got a stew going. Love that. Love the reference. Love the reference. So that's absolutely terrific. But obviously, Bones and Monte are not the only two guards on the roster, not the only two point guards. Well, Monte's not on the roster anymore. Not only point guards that we're going to talk about, we'll talk about the rest of the point guard rotation, how they fit into this conversation when we come back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for joining us, making this part of your day. Folks joining us on a Sunday night. Had to get going early for you this week so you guys were able to have this right in your feeds early on Monday morning. Talk about the point guard rotation. So, Adam, we talked about the difference between Monte and Bones and what the differences that they're going to bring to the table in terms of that role. Now I got Jamal coming back. An interesting question, I think, is do you think that the stuff that Jamal took longer to learn, which was all of the things that kind of Monte did naturally, which we're kind of talking about, the point guard stuff, it took Jamal a little while to learn that stuff. Like, it took him a bit. It really did. Like, his first 2 years were, you know, as most point guards will tell you, it's hard to learn how to play point guard in this league. Again, another reason I'm so impressed with Monte Morris, that he just, like, got that stuff right away, even though Jamal's obviously a way better player than Monte. Do you think that stuff will come back, the two-man game, making pick-and-roll reads, managing the offense, do you think that stuff will come back more naturally and quickly for Jamal than the explosive scoring parts of the game? Or do you think that he'll be able to ease back into, you know, being the blue arrow, being a scorer, those type of things? Which do you think is more likely that Jamal's going to be more comfortable with right off the bat?
One for me to read. I feel like of all the Nuggets players, Jamal's been the one I've least been able to sort of predict in the exact way you're asking me to. Like, what is he going to do?
Sure.
I will say there was a video of him last week, a leg 145 pounds.
Whew, yeah, I saw that.
Which is pretty insane. I mean, I don't know what he was doing pre-injury, but I would guess it's not that. That might have been a PR. Like, it's an enormous amount of weight. And it just goes, and I know that we talked to him over the summer at the exit interview or whatever, you know, he mentioned like he's stronger. In some ways, he's stronger, like stationary at least, like just doing exercises and stuff than he's ever been, because that's all he's been able to do.
Right.
So part of me wonders when you talk about that explosiveness, some of it is yes mental, but I do wonder if he's going to get a fast break early on in the season and like put a windmill dunk in that we haven't seen before, and we're going to be like, wow, he's jumping higher. He's doing these things. It might not translate to dunking through traffic and this or that. That takes some like courage that you'll probably have to build up for. So I don't know. I mean, I say all that to say, I really don't know what parts of Jamal's game are going to come naturally to him and what parts are going to have to be built towards.
So I think what's interesting is to kind of ponder the question of Monte fit very well next to Jamal, and Jamal fit very well next to Monte. I once asked Monte what makes that lineup combination work, and he said, well, it's pretty easy. He wants to shoot, and I let him shoot. And I was like, that's just such a great answer for Monte. Now, Bones, I think, is built a little bit differently. So that's going to be, like, I think, an interesting question there. Is that combination of players is really exciting to me. Bones and Jamal.
I agree.
Just because it's two really explosive players in terms of scoring ability with high-level shooting capability, all these types of things together. Sometimes the fit can be interesting. Sometimes the fit can be weird. So I think it'll be kind of notable to try and figure out how those two play together and what their relationship is together next year, what roles they fill when they're on the court together.
Regular season, I think those two are going to be way better than people expect. I think in the playoffs, you start to talk about, you know, defense and our guys get singled out, this or that. But I think in a regular season, they're so dynamic. Both of them, when they're at their best, can't be guarded even by the league's best defenders. Royce O'Neal's a pretty good defender. I know he's not like the elite best of the best. Hopeless against Jamal Murray. Hopeless. Yeah. Bones Hyland, we see him heat up, and we just see how dynamic he can be. I do think that's going to be a regular season 1-2 punch if you roll them out together. That's going to be like no team has two defenders that can guard them. And it doesn't matter the compromises you end up making. Playoffs, again, is a little bit of a different story. But those two guys, I think, are better than – how many teams have, like – if you just talk about their highs, their peaks, how many teams have a better 1-2 offensive punch than those guys? Like Phoenix, maybe Golden State, but it's not many. It's a short list. It's not that long of a list.
Yeah, I think it's an extremely short list when you look at like
Peaks,
how many guys. Yeah,
peaks.
yeah. I don't know how many like in the league have that kind of capability. So, one thing I think is important to ask here though is I'll ask. You know what? We kind of danced around this. I want to ask you this question. What do you think is Ish Smith's role on this team next season?
I mean, I don't think he plays a lot early on. I think if he's playing, it's probably that Denver is going to a least favorable option, meaning Denver is their main goal for what they wanted this roster to be is not working. Not that he wouldn't play at all. There's injuries and this or that. But if he's playing like when everybody's healthy and he's playing over guys like Christian Brown, Davon Reed, if he's over those guys in the rotation, I think you're probably a little bit compromised because Ish is good. His number one trait is he's so fast. He can get into the paint and then he can dish and distribute or finish at the rim. But then you're small. Then you're talking about him and Bones as your backcourt defensively. Is that good? Bruce Brown's your 3. That's really small now all of a sudden. I don't think that's what you were looking for off of the bench when you assembled this one.
I kind of think that Ish has a role to play. I think the one thing that's important to remember is that most teams, when they have a bench, don't just have like a backup point guard. Like they're able to be like, oh hey, like we can throw a couple of guys in here to get through these couple of minutes and buy ourselves a little bit of time. Like we can make a couple of other rotations to get in there. And I think that there's maybe an ability for them to do that. I would say that I don't expect Ish to be in the rotation immediately, but I do just kind of think that Ish Smith is going to be able to bring a baseline level of competency that is important in terms of just like, hey, we need to get through 5 minutes running pick and roll. Okay, can do, no problem. Like he can make that happen. And that level, I think, of competency, especially, look, the reality is that we know injuries are going to happen, and we know that Jamal is going to be on a minutes restriction, right? And so if you're on a back-to-back, I think it's probably good to have Ish Smith around. I also think, I think Christian Brown is like an interesting one to kind of, I think, and you may have spoken to people with insight onto what their intentions are, at least to start the season, more than I have on this. But like, I don't know if Christian Brown is a guy that I'm just like, oh, like Bones, it seemed like, okay, we want to see what we got in this guy. Like he's got something.
Christian Brown has to prove that he can do that. And he has the uphill battle to do that for sure.
Yeah. And so I think there's probably minutes there. And the defense is going to be bad with Ish. But I also think that, again, if Bones is having a rough stretch, or again, if Bones is having injury issues, I do think that it's really good to have Ish Smith around. I just think that his capability of just doing the stuff that veteran point guards do, which is come off the screen, hit a floater, come off the screen, hit a 3, little stretches. It's not like there'll be a lot of nights when it's not good, but the baseline for it, I think, is really pretty solid. Like Ish Smith is definitely a player that I would trust to run the offense. Now, maybe that struggles if he has to run it with Jokic. If that's the situation, then I think it's like, okay, we're at a very bad point. Like Ish Smith should not be on the court with Jokic just because there's other guys that need minutes with him. Like there's other guys that need those minutes with him.
Yeah, Ish Smith, by the way, would be good with Jokic. So I think that he would.
You think so?
I still think he'd get to the rim. Like if you're quick, man, it's hard to guard with Jokic out in space.
Yeah,
it's hard to guard a quick guard. So
yeah, never mind. I take it all back. Ish Smith is averaging 30 points a year. No. But look, I just think that having these options this is honestly what I've thought a lot about is the Nuggets have options, which they did not last year. And that's extremely helpful when it's just like, hey, this guy's not having a good month. You know what? He doesn't need to have a good month. We got another guy. Oh, hey, this month that guy played better. Now he gets to play more. Like that should be how it is rather than desperately clawing to find any sort of solution to your roster problems, which is how the situation played out last year. Right. So I think, and point guard is still a extremely important, even though in my mind, one, everyone's talked about how fluid positions are, and everyone's talked about, I mentioned the other day about engines. We talked about, offensive engines. That to me is more important, honestly, than having a point guard. Like Jokic, from the perspective that the point guard is the engine, Jokic is the point guard. Right? Like he's the alpha and the omega. He's the beginning and the end of the offense. But I think it's really good for those minutes, especially when he's not on the court. If you're gonna try and get away with their front court rotation, I think you're gonna need really good guard play, and I think they're set up to have a very good set of guards. I have one more question for you, which is, KCP technically was point guard in some of the rotations like that they rolled out with the Lakers, in terms of like LeBron was the engine.
I see.
But KCP would
brought
sometimes
the ball up the court,
right? So like to that degree, does KCP have some value there, just in terms of adding to the overall complement of what guards do?
It's an interesting question. Like I've thought of so many lineups, like combinations, and one I didn't until you just said that was, what if you do go point guardless and you keep Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter and Jokic in your front court, and your back court is, say, Bruce Brown and KCP.
Yep.
And you're talking about now you've got 3 defenders around MPJ and Jokic. Now maybe this is more of a lineup for like an off day for Murray or something, because I think Murray's going to be on the court with Jokic a lot this year. Even if he's playing poorly, you still ride with him. But I don't know. Maybe that is a lineup combination that I didn't foresee that maybe Malone does. That's like, hey, I like that. 2 good defenders in your backcourt, Aaron Gordon defender in your front court. It's interesting. I think it would work. I think it would work largely because almost every lineup with Jokic works.
Yes. But here's the thing, right? Is like and you kind of sold me on this last year. You started talking about how, look, Jokic's floor right now and his ability to raise the floor, like everybody's going to be good with him. That if you put these defenders around him, you're going to have success. And so if you just have one offensive weapon in MPJ, like all of a sudden it's like, oh, now you've got Bruce Brown and KCP and Aaron Gordon, and all 3 of your wings are being defended at a high level.
Who's your point guard? I think Bruce Brown might bring the ball up the court though in that configuration.
I think that they would take turns, and it's just like getting the ball to Jokic at the pinch post, right? Like that's the whole thing. I think a lot of it depends. I guess here's the big question that I don't know the answer to. Who's the better post entry passer between Bruce Brown and KCP?
Oh man, we're gonna find out quick though. We're gonna find out early.
Man, we should write that down. That's gonna be one of our questions for us at after first day of training camp is or second day. They'll do conditioning first day, but second day, who's the better post entry passer between KCP and Bruce Brown?
That would be a fun one to get Jokic a little, give him a little Rakia. And ask him, like, rank the Nuggets in terms of entry passing.
A couple of comments here from the group. By the way, why is Adam in a dungeon? Zamora asks. Another comment earlier above. It's too bad that Adam is now a hostage. That's another good one. It's just dynamite roasting of Adam, whose office is being painted. So he's in a different setup.
My set for this upcoming season. So I hopefully by the next time we record, I'll have at least it'll look different in here.
You couldn't get the painters in while you're in Serbia. Couldn't do that. Couldn't slide that in. Speaking of Serbia, before we get out of here, Nikola Jokic reported to Serbian camp, Eurobasket camp. Yeah. Coach says he looks great. Hopefully that means he won't come off the bench this time. I just can't get over that happened.
Jokic didn't care. Honestly, it might happen again. Who knows? I will say I have a little update, little breaking news. And this comes from our good friend Vojislav, who does the Nuggets Serbia podcast. They had Ogi Stojakovic on the show, assistant coach Ogi Stojakovic, and he talked about Jokic's conditioning just being incredible, but also said that there was like that his leadership has taken a big leap. Like I think the question was something like, what's something that's been going on with Jokic that not getting enough attention? And it was leadership, talking more in film studies, like he's leading film studies more with teammates and stuff like that. So it's a thing I hadn't heard. Nobody really mentioned that. And he brought it up, and I thought that was an interesting detail.
That's interesting that I guess I don't know anything about Eurobasket or really international basketball whatsoever. So like I'll cop to my own ignorance there. Like I wasn't aware that they would already be doing film study and
those are two separate thoughts. Sorry, Matt, I apologize, and I see why that's confusing. Ogi is a Nuggets coach. I know he's a Nuggets coach. You were talking about got it. I thought you were talking about like what like he's been doing with the team, and I was like, I've been told with regards to what he's been doing with the team. The only thing I've heard, and we saw the reports, but I've actually also heard this from other, just other sources, that he's in actually like very impressive shape. So take that for what it's worth.
Muscle watch. muscle.
I don't even think that. Just like it's like not like off season, got to work up again. Like do this. Like no, he's ready. He's fully ready to hit the ground running.
Him and Luka having a muscle watch competition.
Luka's the one that's on muscle watch, man. Like I'm telling you, this is another aside, but I think Luka he's following in the Jokic footsteps. It's the Jokic blueprint. Like first 3 or 4 seasons, body up and down, fluctuate, work your way into it. End of season, you're in great shape, but your reputation is that you're not because of how you came into camp. I think Luka, this is the year he just is like over that hump, and now here he is, nutrition expert Luka.
I think this is the year.
Conditioning.
I think this is the year he's gunning for MVP, so he can get a bonus that's probably tied to his contract. That's what I think.
Yeah,
so
maybe it is.
See. I'm excited for Harden Luka this season with the Dallas Mavericks. Okay.
Do you? It's funny because your guy Hurricane, who people that don't watch the show don't know. Big Matt Moore fan. Big Matt Moore fan of the comment. He says, we didn't mention the Michael Porter workout video. At DNVR, we lean into that stuff, like, workout video. What else are we going to talk about this summer? We like lean into pretending they're a big deal. Do you get into summer workout videos?
No.
At all?
Nope.
Yeah, this is one of those ones that has a right answer.
Like, I mean,
fun,
look,
though.
it's fun. It's totally fun.
Hoodie mellow?
I don't begrudge anyone for enjoying them and consuming them. It's just right. I think the most telling thing for me was when I listened to Drew Hanlon, who's I don't know if folks know this. He's my boy, Embiid's trainer, very outspoken advocate for Joel and against Nikola. But I heard Hanlon speak one time, and Hanlon was talking, and he said that Kelly Oubre was the only player who ever came to him and said he wanted to work on defense. Only player that ever did that and came to him and wanted to work on defense. And this is kind of the thing, is like, guys are all working on, like, I just feel like everyone's working on the same stuff. And most of the stuff that they're working on, their team already has 3 or 4 guys that probably need to be doing that instead of them. So, like, just saying, a lot of these guys.
Here's why it's different, though. Here's why it's different for Michael Porter.
Oh, it is for Porter, for sure, yeah.
I just wanted to. Well, no. I don't even mean in that regard. I just wanted to see him like running and jumping.
Yeah.
And he's doing that. It looks like at a pretty high level. So it's just encouraging to see the like whether or not he's making shots or the new move he added. Like, yeah, come on. Who cares?
Honestly, I'm just glad that it's been this long. He hasn't had another setback. Like, that's really good. Like, everything looks on track for him to return to the court, and we'll figure the rest out from there, as we will do throughout the week here on Locked On Nuggets. More content for you throughout the week here on Locked On Nuggets. We will for sure be back on Wednesday, if not on Tuesday. I think I'm going to do a show on Tuesday. I'm trying to get a guest nailed down for Tuesday. We'll be back on Wednesday with a Jamal Murray episode. Friday, What If? We'll talk to you guys then. Check out the YouTube channel. Leave us 5-star reviews. Do it for us. Leave us a 5-star review. I want that 5-star review on the Apple Podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you guys again next time here on Locked On Nuggets.